Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be making a really creamy tomato soup with a garbanzo bean gluten-free flatbread on the side. So stay tuned and let's get started. So first off, you are going to want to preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And then after that, you are going to want to prep your pan that we are going to be roasting our veggies on. And so I am using some parchment paper that I laid out there. And here we have our tomatoes. These are what we're going to cut up first. And you can use whatever tomatoes you'd like. I personally am using these hothouse tomatoes first. This is a really large one. And as you can see, I'm just cutting it up into small pieces so that when I place them on the roasting pan, they will all be evenly distributed and I'll get that nice smoky brownness on all of the roasted vegetables. And then I'm going to cut up 5 more smaller, or actually this is six smaller tomatoes as well. This is just what I had on hand. You can use 2 really large ones or 4 medium ones, whatever you like. It doesn't matter. We're going to be roasting them anyway, so I'm just chopping off the stem and then placing them on the pan. So I'll show you what these look like distributed on the pan as well in just a moment. I'm just cutting all the vegetables up first and placing them nicely and evenly so that they can all be nicely roasted and evenly laid out on the pan. So next up we have our 3 carrots. So I'm just cutting off some of the edge. I already rinsed these off. And then I'm just going to cut these into smaller pieces. I actually just, cut them in half here and I'm going to lay them out on the pan as well. And here you see me just putting some of the scraps in a bowl. I'm going to put this in a bag for later for a soup stock. And next up we have 2 medium to small size onions. So I'm going to cut these up as well. And a lot of these vegetables, if you have your own specific way that you want to cut them, that's totally fine as well. As you can see, I'm just peeling off the skin, and the skins, I use these actually for the scraps that I will be putting in the freezer for a veggie broth. So I'm really upcycling a lot of the scraps. They really make a great broth. So after I peeled these off, I'm placing them on the pan, and then I am going to continue to cut the rest of the onion and this onion as well. And then I'm going to speed this up so that we can get to the next step. And next up we have 2 red bell peppers. So for the color and also for the taste, we are going to be using red bell peppers. So we're going to cut these up as well. What I usually do is just cut all the edges off and then toss the stem in my veggie broth bag. And then I'm going to set these on the pan so that I can cut up the next one and do the same exact thing. So I'm going to speed this up as well. And next up we have some garlic. So you guys know I love garlic, and garlic roasted for this recipe is going to add so much flavor as well. And as you can see here, I like to smash the garlic. It makes it easier to peel. So you'll see me doing that for each one. And then I set it in the pan, and I'm doing that for all 7 to 8 of these. I know it can seem a little tedious, but fresh garlic is the best. So I prefer to use fresh. Now, this is what it looks like in the pan when it's all set and done and ready to go into the oven. So this is how I set them. I know they're a little bit crammed, but that is totally okay. And now we're going to set them in the oven, and I am going to place the timer on for 20 minutes. Okay, and next up I wanted to show you guys what I did with my veggie scraps. So as you can see, I'm not going to throw them away. I'm going to upcycle them and put them in a bag and throw them in the freezer for when I want to make a veggie broth. And this is the perfect way to recycle all of your scraps from your fruits and vegetables, or mostly your vegetables. So I do that, and then I just throw it in the freezer, and anytime I want to make a veggie stock, I have it all ready to go, and it becomes really rich when you use so many of the skins and all of the herbs and aromatics. It's so good. Okay, so next up we have our garbanzo beans. We are going to be making the garbanzo bean flatbread. So yes, this is also gluten-free. I am going to be using 1 cup of garbanzo beans. As you can see, these are just regular garbanzo beans that are dried, and I am going to be turning them into a garbanzo bean flour. So if you purchase some garbanzo bean flour at the store, that's totally fine too. This is just an extra step that we have because I have some garbanzo beans here, and I'm going to blend it up until it is nice and fine so that we can make the garbanzo bean flatbread. Okay, so we are all done. I'm going to show you guys kind of the consistency of the flour. So here it is here. And next up, we are going to be mixing all of the ingredients together that make the batter. So after you put the garbanzo bean flour in a bowl, you will also be adding 2 cups of water. And then we're going to mix this thoroughly. You want to make sure that it's mixed up to where all of the clumps are gone and to where you don't see any air bubbles. So this may take a few minutes, and that's okay. Just mix it as long as it is completely blended well together. And you will even notice as you mix it up, it will start to thicken because the garbanzo beans are going to start to soak up a lot of the water. Here you can see me switch out my fork for a whisk because the whisk was going to get a lot of those dry bubbles and air out of the batter. So I'm mixing it all up here and it's starting to thicken. I'm going to speed this up a little bit. And as you notice, as I stir and whisk this, it kind of has that bubbly, airy feeling as it starts to thicken. So here's the texture that you want. And now we can get started with adding some of the herbs to this. Now you can keep it really simple if you'd like, but I love to have a lot of aromatics and flavors into the bread as well. So I put 1 teaspoon of thyme, and then I put a half a teaspoon of crushed chili pepper as well as a teaspoon of regular pepper, and I'm also going to put a half a teaspoon of sea salt. I'm using here the pink Himalayan salt because that one is my favorite, and I just crushed it up beforehand and then poured it in the spoon here. Lastly, 1 tablespoon of Italian seasoning, and then we're going to mix this all up together. And as you'll see, as the time goes on, this stuff will just continue to get thicker and thicker as the garbanzo beans soak up the water. So I'm actually going to let this sit for 15 minutes because I do want it to be a little bit thicker. Now, if it gets too thick, you can always add water, but first, our veggies are almost ready. What we're going to do is, as you can see here, they're not completely like browned or broiled yet. So I'm going to put them back in and let them broil for a few minutes until the tops are nice and browned. So I'm going to set my oven on the broiler for high for 8 minutes. And while that cooks, I'm going to get started on my garbanzo bean flatbread. So as you know, I always use a non-stick pan here. This is a non-stick ceramic pan. This is on medium high, and I did speed this up so you'll notice that it'll start to get those air bubbles on the top a lot quicker than it would in real life. But basically that's what you're going to look for before you turn the flatbread over. Now you could also do this flatbread in the oven as well, but I'll save that for another tutorial. But as you can see, I'm just kind of letting it dry out on the top with the air bubbles, and then I'm going to flip it. And once I flip it here, you'll notice that it'll take still a few minutes to make sure that the other side is completely cooked through. And then after that, you are all done. And from here on out, that amount of garbanzo bean batter makes about 5 to 6 of these small flatbreads. And you can make these flatbreads any style that you want, whether you want them circle, round, square. But I just kind of did these in like square, circle patterns or whatnot. But this is what they look like when they're all done in close up. As you can see, they kind of have those little holes in them. So it reminds me of like the quinoa soft bread, but a little bit harder. So as you can see, I'm making another one here, but you know how to do the rest. So we're going to move on to the next step. Our veggies are nice and roasted. So we're going to let them just chill off for a second. So I'm going to put them here in a different container in a pot and let them cool off so that we can put them in the Vitamix after and blend them. And as you'll notice too, at the end, there's going to be a lot of this juice left over. I am going to save that and put it into the Vitamix as well. So make sure you keep that or pour it into the pot that you're going to let it cool in. As you know, this is a soup, so we want to get all of the juices that were extracted from all of our aromatics. And once this has all cooled off, then we will be transferring it into the Vitamix. I'm using some tongs here because some of the vegetables are still really warm, and although I let them cool off for a few minutes, they're still kind of hot to touch, so just be cautious of that. And of course, make sure you pour that juice in there. You want all of that flavor. And then we are going to turn the Vitamix on and blend this thoroughly until it is nice and creamy. Make sure all of the bits and pieces are completely blended down. And now that we are all done, I will show you what it looks like. And then we are going to start mixing a few other ingredients in here. You're going to need a full can of coconut milk. This one here is the reduced fat, but you can totally use the regular fat. I use that one all the time, but I just didn't have any more, so that one will work as well. And you're going to need a pot. So we are going to put this back on the stove and reheat this. So pour all of your ingredients from the blender in there, and then we are also going to pour that full can of the coconut milk in there as well. And then go ahead and blend this up, or just mix it together. And then we are going to get ready to put this on the stove to heat it up. But before we do that, I'm going to add a little tiny bit of water to the Vitamix, just so I can get all that little bits of extra flavor out in there. And then I'm just going to pour that into the pot as well. And then we can get ready to put this on the stove to heat it up. And as you'll notice too, the color of the coconut milk mixed with the tomato and the roasted red pepper and all the vegetables brings out this like really bright orange color. So next up, put this on the stove, and we are going to turn this on medium high and get this cooking. So next up, we are going to add a teaspoon of Himalayan pink salt, a teaspoon of dried basil, and about a half a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and a little bit of crushed red pepper as well if you like spicy. And I'm also putting about a half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And then we're going to mix this all up while it is heating and let this bubble up and boil a little bit. So we want to cook off the coconut taste. You will not be able to taste the coconut in this at all once it is finished. So I'm going to let it cook and simmer, but I'm just mixing all of the ingredients first. And one of the ingredients I forgot, my favorite, thyme. So I put a teaspoon of thyme in there as well. It's optional, but it really adds a lot of depth to the soup as well. And as you can see, it will start to really boil over here. And you want to let this boil for about 15 minutes. And then you can actually taste it to see if the coconut flavoring has gone away. That's kind of how you'll know, but it roughly takes about 15 minutes. Let this boil. I am going to take you guys with me outside into my backyard and get some fresh basil. My basil is doing so good, and it's so big, actually much bigger than it is here in this video, but I grabbed a few leaves and I am going to use those and rip them up. For some reason, when you rip them versus cutting them, you get so much more of the flavor. So I'm going to rip them up here and put them into the boiling pot. And then I'm going to mix that up, and that is going to bring a lot of the tomato basil flavor. Now you can add more or less if you'd like and just taste it along the way, but I'm stirring it up here. As you can see, sometimes a little bit of the edges will kind of collect some of the tomato. So just make sure you mix it, and then it's pretty much almost done. So here you can see the texture and the consistency that I was able to get. It's really, really creamy. And it tastes absolutely amazing. I can't wait for you guys to try it. And now we are almost ready to plate everything. So let's get started on that now that we're all done. So since you had made all of your garbanzo bean flatbreads, we are going to quickly put these in the oven to heat them up a little bit. Now you can eat them soft like this, but I actually kind of like mine a little bit crispy. But it's your preference, but I'm going to put them in the oven and broil them on high. And I'm just going to put them on the rack, and make sure you keep an eye on them because they can burn pretty quick depending on your broiler. Everybody's ovens and broilers work a little bit different. So here you'll see me using the tongs because you want to be careful not to burn yourself, but I had turned them over already. But as you can see, this side, it was nice and crispy, and that's exactly how I like them. You see how it breaks apart like that? That's exactly how I wanted it to be, nice and crispy, but still a tad bit soft on the inside. And those only take a few minutes to make nice and crunchy, just like how I like them. So just make sure you keep a real good eye on those. You don't want them to burn. Now we are going to plate our tomato soup. I put it in a nice large bowl. I cut my garbanzo bean breads into small pieces, or broke them, I should say. And then I am going to show you how it all looks together in one bowl, and then we will taste it. It's so good. So here we have the tomato soup. I like to put a little bit of some basil leaves on top and I break them up, and then I serve it with a few of the garbanzo bean flatbreads. And that is it. I hope you guys really enjoy this. I know that it's a really simple soup, but it's nice and filling and perfect for the cold weather, and everyone will like it. I mean, people that don't even like tomato soup really like this one. So I hope you guys enjoy. If you do make it, make sure to tag me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.